got the interview that I didn't think I was going to get. I'm going to go interview someone that has been training for a long time in his life. He's a fairly young gentleman, but he's trained for most of his existence on this earth. I'm sure you'll enjoy this interview. I know I'm gonna. Driving to the location. We'll take it from there. We'll set up and get it going. Can't wait till you guys see it. There he is, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up?
That's who we're going to interview. Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 7th episode of Martial Insight and Advice with Randy Haskins. My guest, Puck. That's what we call him. If you know, you know. Alpha Flight. Remember that. I've been waiting for this interview for a while. I've been training for 46 years of my life in a variety of different systems and styles of those respective systems. And I met this young man years ago working at Hamden County House of Corrections. And I became intrigued with his abilities after witnessing some things that he was able to do martially. And there's not too many people I'm impressed with within the martial community, not in a negative way or disrespectful way, but there's too many commoners out there. And he is definitely a cut above, and I wanted to hear his view on questions that I've asked other people in interviews. So I sought out this interview. He graciously agreed, and I'm honored to be here. So if Puck could introduce himself and where he began his martial journey, what motivated him to.
How you doing? My name's Ben Belisle. I've known Randy for about 15 years now, at work and training, and yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me. My martial path started when I was a kid. I had family members that were involved in martial arts and combat sports, boxing, things like that. But I never really took a ton of interest into it until I was a little older, and I was working out at a gym. There was a gentleman there that was teaching a class, and I just went up to him, introduced myself, started talking to him, and he's like, yeah, I'm a martial arts coach, and he told me about his background and what he was teaching, and I was interested, and it just took off from there.
What exactly did you start studying? Is there any?
So my coach's his name's Dave Gavoni, and he has a background in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, American freestyle kickboxing, and judo. Okay. And so he likes to start his students off with strictly judo, and then he filters in jiu-jitsu and kickboxing from there. And so I started with him, and I've since then trained at other facilities and other gyms, other disciplines as well, training diverse Muay Thai with Sam Major and other mixed martial arts gyms and things like that.
Would you say it was more sport oriented or self-protection oriented, or how would you categorize your training as opposed to your expression of it?
That's a good question. My initial start in it was primarily sport. In fact, almost all of my training has been from the sport aspect. But it doesn't take a genius to extrapolate what would work in a reality setting and what techniques are more effective for sport. So I think that's kind of where I come into play. Is like, I can kind of figure out what's techniques and what situations call for which ways to handle it.
That is what intrigued me most about you, because you would like to believe it doesn't take a genius to figure that out, but within the martial community, it's pretty interesting how many people train within the sport context and can't really tell the difference and still express that in the street, and run the risk of coming in second in a fight to the death. That's what intrigues me about you, is your ability to discern between the two.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoy the sport aspect of it the most, but I'm always thinking about scenarios in my head, both in and out of sport. So when I'm thinking in that out of sport context, I'm thinking what tools would best apply in those situations.
So how do you stay motivated to continue your martial journey?
I draw inspiration from everywhere. From there's people I follow on social media, friends of mine such as yourself, and from the sport aspect, that I see professional fighters, doing their thing, and I draw motivation and inspiration from everywhere. Even things that aren't related to martial arts, I will relate them to martial arts and then use that.
How would you say your martial journey, if you would say, how has it affected or enhanced your life?
Oh, immensely. So I always say I use my martial arts training every single day. And if I never get in a fight for the rest of my life, I'll still continue to use that every single day, just in how I carry myself, how I approach situations, what situations I will allow or not allow myself to be in. And all that has to do with martial arts training and martial arts thinking more than martial arts training. Confidence and just understanding how to put in your words, how violence happens, how combat happens, and just being able to navigate that.
Indeed. Is there anything you wish you had done differently in reference to your martial journey?
I just wish I was exposed to the people I was exposed to years earlier. Dave Gavoni's a fantastic coach. He's a fantastic human, and I just wish I would have met him, at 10 years old, and I wish I would have started earlier.
Yeah, I know Dave. Matter of fact, I met him through you, and I have to agree with you. Very solid guy, very solid physically, very solid mentally, and as a personality. He kind of reminds me of Tommy Rondo. They could be twins.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was showing Tommy some training pictures, and he thought he saw a picture of Dave, and he thought it was himself. So yeah,
Yes.
They both have very different mental approaches, though. Tommy and Dave. I This isn't anything Dave wouldn't tell you. It's his mental game and his will that drives him. And if he walked into in a sport setting, if he walked into a lot of different gyms or dojos, there might be somebody that, in a strictly jiu-jitsu match might get the best of him, but all around he's a very formidable opponent because of his mental game. Like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Dave doesn't. That won't affect his plan. He's a strong-willed guy.
Yeah, I saw that when we were training, and not as to the levels that you have seen, but he's a pretty impressive guy, much like yourself. In training, what is your personal goal, overall goal in training?
I just want to be better than I was the day before. So I'm not trying to beat this guy or be better than that guy. And that might be physically or it might be mentally too. If I could, maybe uncover new pathways to get to certain positions or certain maneuvers, that's a mental victory for me. That's kind of my goal, is to just kind of continue to understand how everything happens.
Do you think people value physical skills more than information and understanding?
So it's funny. I think it goes both ways.
Okay.
I think sometimes people don't understand how much athleticism, like natural, pure athleticism, comes into play, and how much the cerebral side comes into play. And I think when you fuse the both, like you get, a student who's really intelligent, understands things, and just has physical capabilities that no one else has. Like, that's how you get a John Jones, who in my opinion would be the GOAT of sport, martial arts, of MMA. But yeah, exceptionally talented physically, but he also comes, he clearly has a high level of cage IQ, so, things like that, yeah.
That's the first name I thought of when you started speaking about that.
Yeah. Boxing too, like you get, somebody with Freddie Roach's understanding and Manny Pacquiao's abilities, and you put those two together, and now you've got a pretty legendary boxer. So.
Do you believe there is a significant difference between training contexts?
What do you mean?
Like people who train for aesthetics as opposed to people who train for self-protection, or people who train for sport?
So yeah, I think there's a huge difference in the approach to the training. I think a lot of instructors do their students a disservice in saying that this particular, execution is good for everything. When, there's very few times do you have a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think sometimes sport instructors feel that, their style is effective outside of sport, or sometimes, some street or reality instructors think that their style might be effective in sport combat, and sometimes it just doesn't draw parallels like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I train more for pragmatic purposes. I've done competition only because my instructors wanted me to, and I know half the stuff that I do really doesn't bode well in sport-oriented schools. They feel I'm too aggressive. They feel I'm too, like a lot of, say, within my ground game, I do a lot of spine locks, which are pretty, within the 10th planet system, they allow everything. But when we go a lot of places, and a lot of competitions, certain ranks, you're not allowed to do leg locks, you're not allowed to do spine locks. You're not allowed to, do a lot of things. So, yeah, I have to agree with that. A lot of things that people do within their systems that train in self-protection, or as we in Japanese call it, Goshin-Jutsu arts. They're like putting the thumbs in people's eyes and things, you know. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that.
Just to expand on what I was saying, I think a lot of training at certain gyms happens in theory, and it's always good to develop the mental side like that. But it's also difficult to put. It's dangerous to put too much faith in theory-based training, because if the theory proves incorrect, it could be at the worst of times. So,
like, give me an example. Give me an example.
Like an instructor that might tell you that a pressure point will cause somebody to their body to shut down, and then that person's in that situation. He reaches for it and it doesn't work. So things like that. If you kick this person this way, it's gonna kick his kneecap off, and then they execute that in a situation that's a dire situation. It doesn't work. It's dangerous.
How does your training differ from the time you began as opposed to now?
Well, when I started, I was 100 miles an hour out the gate, and now I see that that might not be the best approach physically, or there's no way to get longevity like that. I definitely put more of an emphasis on the mental side of martial arts now than I did early on. Yeah, I think that's the biggest, most significant change in just my approach to the mental side, as opposed to just the purely physical side.
From a fan's point of view, whose martial acumen do you most admire?
It's got to. Well, there's a lot of I would break that down into different categories. Overall, I think it's John Jones is just. You got to respect a guy that he beat the best strikers on the planet in striking. He beat the best wrestlers using. He beats guys at their game. That's impressive. But there's other guys like who's maybe their preparation from a sports standpoint. Their preparation I respect, or their coaching I respect. But yeah, guys like Adesanya. I mean, I love his movement. Things like that. Usman, you got to respect his preparation. So. Anybody that's willing to put themselves, I respect anybody that's willing to put themselves in those situations. Anybody that's willing to take risk, you got to respect them. I almost hate watching either whether it be boxing or MMA with casual fans, because they're like, oh, I would just do this, I would just do that.
Yeah. I
always have to bring up this comparison, and I'm sure there's people. I don't really follow baseball that much, but if CC Sabathia was pitching to you, he would blow every single pitch by you.
Absolutely.
And then if you were pitching to I don't know who's a big baseball star now, but I don't know, the star player in the Yankees, you're pitching to him, he's hitting everything you put in the strike zone yard.
Indeed.
But when the best pitcher faces the best batter, he doesn't blow every single pitch by him, and he doesn't hit every single pitch out of the yards, because their skill levels kind of negate each other. So when you're watching high-level martial artists or high-level boxers or high-level MMA practitioners, it's tough to cast judgment on it, because you got to take into account the other combatant's skill level and how much that comes into play, and how much you have to respect their abilities. So.
funny you mention that. Yeah, because that's one of my biggest pet peeves as well. When I sit there and I watch fights with certain people and the stuff they start to say and never trained a day in their life and I just stare at them.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
It's funny because I'll still watch an NFL football game and Tom Brady throws an interception. I'll go, oh, come on. It's not like I could do any better. So I understand the same thing's happening in MMA. Like, people are watching the fights, and, that's a right as a sports fan to be critical of the athletes involved. But, it's not like I'm going to say, oh, I would have, it's tough to say how you would have handled it differently because the situations are vastly different. The speed at which it happens at, the intensity level at which it happens at, is very different than it is on your living room chair.
Yeah, absolutely. One gentleman that is famous for doing that, just Monday morning quarterbacking these fights, of these professional athletes, decided to try his hand with one of my students, one of my black belts, and it didn't go well. And so he has a newfound respect at this level. You understand? So I'm sure it translates up to that level now.
Sure.
Hopefully. But yes, that's a funny happenstance.
Yeah.
Speaking
of this level and about the respect I was just talking about, it's not just the UFC or the championship boxers that I'm saying I respect. It's any martial artist that's willing to put themselves out there, to take that risk, to get in a ring, to get in a cage. I have a lot of respect for all those guys.
I remember you tried out for The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make any excuses. There was better prepared people there than I was. The weight classes weren't really in my favor, and I had already told a bunch of training partners I was going to do it. But yeah, I probably wasn't ready yet.
No, but that's big. That's big. Whatever transpired, we don't know. I don't know, but just that's big.
My goal in martial arts was never to grace the UFC octagon or anything like that. I was just looking to to put my skill set out there against other high level guys.
And that's big. That was a subject we touched on. That was the premise behind the interviewing Tommy Rondo Sensei, and that has been my the pride that I have within myself is the fact that I travel and I try to train with the best and test myself against the best. And that is an example of your mentality and your desire to expand and not be just a local martial artist, which speaks volumes about you. Another reason why Martial Insight and Advice is here. What's more important to you in training, right? Let's say you're training someone. Would it be time spent in training? For example, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they say average person receives a black belt in 10 years, right? On average. Or one's ability to understand and satisfy the information and or curriculum. So let's say someone just has the ability to retain information, express that information physically, and within a 2-year span, 3-year span, would you award them rank at that time, or would you make them wait to 10 years?
It's a good question. I think it has to do with the goal of the organization awarding the rank and the goal of the individual. So you're talking about understanding information and how important that is. It depends on the context it's used in. Here's what I mean. You could take, I don't know, a Stephen Hawking. I don't want to pick on him, but you could take, some of the brightest people I know, and you could educate them in some of these martial concepts for a year. They're, and then if you put them up against like somebody with the physical prowess of John Jones, or locally Scotty Gerlich, it might not bode so well for them. I think that's where that balance comes in, the ability to execute physically as well as the mental understanding behind it. So to ask, what's more important, I think that would have to come down to an individual case-by-case basis.
I agree. I agree 1,000%. That's my point with that question, because my mentality is, and this is, I'm not a stickler for time.
Right.
If someone has the ability to express physically the information, meaning utilize the information effortlessly in the arenas that that are important to me, and it's about surviving in the street, and this or that, and understand the curriculum and all that within a 3-year span, and their understanding and abilities are equivalent to a black belt level, I'll award a black belt 3 years.
Yeah, sure.
Because everybody's different. Some people take 10 years, some people take 3, some people take 4, some people take 9. I would reward accordingly to that individual's understanding and physical ability,
right,
and all those things.
I think it's definitely a case-by-case situation, because so many people, you could provide them with every piece of information, but if it just comes down to who they are as a person, and when they get into a situation, whether it be a reality street fight situation that your gym or your dojo is preparing for, or a sport application, either or, the intensity of those situations clouds people's minds. It's just a fact. Athletically,
stress.
Stress. So it's somebody's fight or flight. Like, I remember my first boxing match I ever did, my coach was telling me, you need to operate at this level, because the second you get between those ropes and you hear the crowd and everything, you're going to operate at this level. So if you're here and you drop down to here, you could still, his point was, there's
I agree
the intensity, the other distractions going on. So yeah, I think it's a case by case, like somebody who's athletically gifted and has a pretty aggressive personality, like a John Jones or like a Scotty G. It's tough to engage those guys. It would be tough to prepare somebody to engage those guys that didn't have, a baseline fight or flight like theirs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Guys like, not to cut you off, but guys like my coach Dave, when I talked about his mental game probably being his biggest asset, and the fact that it's tough to deter him from his game plan. When you're training and you get involved against an opponent like that, street or sport, if you're not mentally prepared to take on a challenge like that, no matter how much information you have, it could be tough.
Yeah, I think you have the same drive, when it comes to using your art and just standing your ground. That I always love that about you. How you'll just be sitting somewhere and somebody will try you or say something, and if the situation calls for you to have to engage, you just go full steam ahead.
It's I think a lot of people, I'm not the most physically imposing guy out there, and there's a lesson I learned about martial arts. When you asked where I draw motivation from, or I'll take that one step further and where I learned my lessons from. I keep referencing, Sam Major, Dave Gavoni as my coaches. But from the mental side, I've learned some of the most important martial lessons from people that have never trained a day in their life. I grew up with a friend. His name's Greg. He's a great guy. Nice guy, ear-to-ear smile, 24/7. And he probably couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. But he keeps himself in good shape, and he's not a coward. And when people step to him at a certain intensity level, when he steps back, I've seen them kind of back off. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, they should have, wiped him down right there. And he'd turn around and go, I can't believe I didn't kick my ass. But, it's because he was, and so, I learned that, like, sometimes a lot of people, they do a lot of stuff for show, and they might not have the understanding or the willingness to engage after it. So I think a lot of situations can be handled, a lot of situations can even be avoided just by your willingness to handle them.
My instructor, Nori Kudo Sensei, had told me a story about how when he was in Japan and he was younger, I want to say elementary school, don't quote me on that, not too sure, but it was some level of school, and this bully was picking on him and told him he was going to beat him up the next day in school. So when he went home the next day, he tells his parents he doesn't want to go to school. His father and mother are like, what are you talking about? You're going to school. He was too scared to go to school. He didn't want to go, but they forced him to go to school. Well, so he goes to school. When he gets to school, the bully wasn't there. And he said that always stuck in his mind. The bully was just as scared as he was and didn't show up. So him going to school, he saw that, and that always stuck in his mind. So anytime he entered international competition, he's won many different competitions, international competitions, judo competitions. He also had done sumo. But he recognized that the person across from him was probably just as scared as he was.
Yeah. When I talk about willingness to engage, I'm not trying to say no one ever gets scared. It's just being able to use that fear and be able to control that fear. Whenever you talk about fighting and fear, it's hard not to talk about like Mike Tyson, who's regarded as one of the fiercest boxers of the modern era for sure. And any documentary, and there's dozens of them out about him, American culture is fascinated with Mike Tyson. And he just tells you, he's like, I was a scared kid. He was a hell of a puncher and a pretty talented, but same thing, just a scared kid. And he was able to just
manage that fear and focus it.
Yeah, and focus it. So I'm not saying that everybody has to be devoid of any fear in any situation. It's just about being able to manage it.
Absolutely.
And understand that, like your instructor was saying, the other guy's equally as scared. My coach used to talk about bullies, and he would always advocate for, don't hit if you don't have to, but if you have to, hit first and hit hard. And, I've seen it myself. So many bullies, they get in someone's face and the guy's like, dude, I have no problems. Hands by his side, head sticking out, and then the bully hits him. If they redirected that energy into hitting first, it might change some minds, And it's not even that, you don't even have to win every fight. If the juice isn't worth the squeeze, the other person's not going to want to engage anyways. If the cost of victory is that great, that's a great deterrent as well. So
great way of looking at things. As you see, this is why I interview the people that I interview. If you listen to how he expresses himself and the things that he says, food for thought. within the martial community, and it doesn't even always apply to martial artists. It can apply to anyone engaging in any activity within their life. Just think about that.
I think, real quick, there's one more like story that's kind of tied to that I love to talk about. I don't think I'm the best martial artist by any stretch, but when you talk about willingness to engage, I like to put it in these terms. If you and I played basketball one-on-one right now, regardless of who wins, nobody's going to talk about that. Nobody cares. If we played ping pong or whatever, it's arbitrary. But if we fight right now, regardless of who wins, it will be the talk of, work or our network of friends for a while. And for me, from a sporting aspect, not from a reality, life or death aspect, from a sporting aspect, fighting is not much different than ping pong or basketball for me, and from a sporting aspect. So I think that kind of, I think society puts in, and certainly the macho, I beat this guy, I can beat that guy, definitely comes into play. But I think people make a huge deal about it, and it, from a reality aspect, it might be huge, but from a sporting aspect, it's. If I lose a hockey game Sunday night, Monday morning, nothing changes.
We come to the part of the interview where I ask, what insight and/or advice would you give to someone wanting to begin his or her martial journey and/or competition career?
I think the first piece of advice would be. There's two pieces of advice I love to give to people, so I'm going to answer this question twice. The first is, don't become enamored by the first coach or trainer you come in contact with.
Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, go around and see what you like. Evaluate your goal and your reason for training, because as elite of a coach as you are, you're not the best fit for everyone. And so maybe that athlete or that candidate might be better off somewhere else for their goals. And then the other advice I would give is stick with it for a little while. Don't just come in. To me, I like to look at martial arts, especially from the beginning, as a puzzle. And you get a bunch of pieces, but it doesn't really make sense. Then after a while, once you start piecing a bunch of those pieces together, you start to see the picture. So I think that's kind of how martial arts played out for me. Initially, I would learn different techniques and different moves, and then as I got, as I evolved farther on down the line, things started to fit together, like that puzzle I keep talking about. But yeah, I would say visit a few different places, talk to a few different coaches, try to determine what your goals are, the reason your training is, and then try to find the coaches and the instructors that best suit your situation, because there is no one size fits all solution.
Great advice. I want to thank you for allowing us to your private gym for this interview. And is there anything you'd like the people to know?
I'm just curious if any of my answers differed greatly from, you said this is episode 7. I watched a couple of them, but I didn't see all of them. What did everybody else have to say, or what, if anything, was vastly different in my approach or my view? Or what did I say that you're thinking right now, I'm not sure I agree with that? I'd like a little, pushback, or, see your perspective on what I might have said.
Well, if you have anything that you disagree with, write it in the comments, and we'll do a follow-up to this interview. I strongly enjoyed the conversation, everything you had to say, very interesting. I agree with a lot of things you said, absolutely. There's not too much that I didn't agree with. You articulated well, and you got your point across very clearly. You, please, subscribe, Underground Alliance. Hit that bell so you get all the notifications when new content comes out. Again, leave a comment for Puck. Share with all your friends. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you on the other side.
This video is dedicated to Darkman X, DMX. Rest in peace. We will miss you. Thank you for all you've done. I'd like to take this time to thank our sponsor. Make sure you check them out on Instagram. Custom Merch. That's CUZTOMMERCH.